Good evening and welcome to the Burger Room here in Jefferson at FCCU. And welcome to tonight's debate from the Assembly Districts of 33, 38, and 43. This event is co-sponsored by Fort Atkinson, Jefferson, and Watertown Chambers of Commerce, and sponsored by the American Association of University Women, the Daily Jefferson County Union, and WFAW Radio. My name is Gary Douglas. I'm filling in for Michael Fish. Michael is unable to be here tonight. I know he was looking very much forward to being a part of this, and we wish Michael a speedy recovery. We'll be speaking with candidates from the three districts tonight, beginning with the Assembly District 33, followed by District 38, and conclude with the candidates for District 43. We're in a little bit of a tight schedule tonight. We want to try to get everybody in and get out of here at a very decent time tonight, so we'll try to keep things moving as quickly as we can. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond to each question, 1 minute of rebuttal if requested, as well as 2 minutes for closing statements. The timer will be available to make sure that we stay on schedule here tonight. Our first question this evening is to Representative Cody Horlacher. Thank you for joining us. He's from Assembly District 33, the incumbent. Cody, tell us why you are running and what would be your top priorities if you were to be re-elected.
Yeah. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I guess that is one of the benefits of the Brewers not being in the World Series, that we do not have active conflict in our schedule. Thank you to WFAW for sponsoring this event, and all of you folks who have turned out from near and far to be here tonight, and for those folks tuning in, listening to us. So, first and foremost, I want to continue my work as the chair of the Regulatory Licensing Reform Committee, working to roll back red tape in order to create those opportunities for businesses in Wisconsin to flourish and to grow. I also want to continue my work on public safety as it relates to the heroin and opiate epidemic, and continue my work on the Criminal Justice Committee. I'm also the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, and a host of others. Recently, I was appointed to the Blue Ribbon Commission on School Funding, which is another top priority that we will face going into this next budget cycle. Obviously, education funding is important to, I'm sure, every candidate up here, otherwise they would not be in this room here with all of you tonight. That said, I feel like I've done a lot of good work, particularly in the last 2 years here on NCLEX, helping curb the scourge of methamphetamine rise in our area, as well as creating opportunities and access for my Hire Heroes bill, which allows job training access for combat vets after they get back from combat. And I see my time is running out. My last point is my bill on allowing school districts more flexibility when they go to purchase school buses for their different districts, and creating more flexibility and cutting red tape from the government. Thank you.
Challenging Mr. Horlacher is Brandon White. Brandon, thank you for joining us this evening. Mr. White, tell us why you are running and what would be your top priorities if you were to be elected.
Hi, thank you. I did run in 2016, so I imagine some of you know me. The big reason why I decided to step up again is because I figured what happened in 2016 was going to happen again in 2018, and it seems to be going that way. We hear about how education is a huge priority. We need to do something about health care, getting people insurance coverage. We need adequate funding for the schools. And I'm just left here wondering, why do they suddenly seem to care about this now? They've had 2 years to address these issues, and even more than that, and now there's a sense of urgency. Is it just because we have election season approaching again, and they're looking at the polls and see a lot of people are concerned about it? What I promise, if elected, is that I will care about these issues, healthcare, education, the whole year, not just when an election is rolling around and trying to get votes. Thank you.
Mr. White, according to data from the Wisconsin...
Rebut, I believe I have a minute.
Yes, please, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just to make it clear, I do not do this just during election season. But last year, year alone, I've had 19 different coffee with Cody sessions where I have the ability for an hour at a time, and I hold them at coffee shops across the district, the ability for anybody to come to me with their specific issues or concerns. In addition to that, anybody who calls my office, I sit down with if they so request. So it's not like I'm just doing this during the campaign season. I'm out here every day across the district, from Guanago to Fort Atkinson to Jefferson. I have taken that approach from the start of my time in the assembly, and it is something that I will continue to do. It's not because I do it for votes. I do it because I care. I care about you, and I care about your family.
Our first question goes to Mr. White. According to data from the Wisconsin Policy Forum, Wisconsin will need at least additional 300,000 workers over the next 20 years just to keep its workforce at current levels. What can our region be doing to address the workforce shortage that plagues our local employers?
Well, as in my first term on the county board, we are definitely on the local level working with small businesses to do what we can to make this a more attractive area, encourage investments, and bring in private businesses. Unfortunately, it seems like what is happening with job creation out of the state capital lately is I guess everyone is probably on their minds, Foxconn, throwing away several billions of dollars for jobs, and I agree there's a time and a place for offering incentives to businesses for that, but I'm left asking myself, how does that actually benefit Jefferson County? How does that benefit this area? And is that really the best use of our dollars if we're just concentrated in one area of the state? So if elected, I would actually look at each of these bills, these incentives, and say, what does it do for our area? Not just, is it going to make many jobs in one corner of the state?
Representative Horlocker, same question. According to data from the Wisconsin Policy Forum, Wisconsin will need at least an additional 300,000 workers over the next 20 years just to keep its workforce at current levels. What can our region be doing to address the workforce shortage that plagues our local employers?
Thank you for the question. This is a multi-pronged approach. Number one, education. Education not only starts at the elementary school level with Fab Labs that we have put more money into than ever before, but also at the high schools. I've toured everyone in the district and made sure that we have the type of programming that will satisfy the future workforce, right? Both with autos and shop, but also those soft skills if you are pursuing a 4-year degree. The recent merger between the UW system and the 2-year campuses, I think, will also aid in that and helping streamline the process to instill that type of future educational opportunities for the workforce that we are going to need. I think that Foxconn, I voted for Foxconn. I was hesitant, as anybody should be when looking at a proposal that large. Mind you, I did not vote for the Bucks Arena, and I did not vote for the Kimberly-Clark bailout. But I do believe that Foxconn is going to be transformational for this state. 13,000 new jobs, the largest manufacturing campus in the world, 22,000 indirect jobs, an 18-to-1 return on our investment. And it's not a tax handout, these are tax credits. So they don't get them unless they actually perform and put their money where their mouth is. 90% of all contractors are going to come from Wisconsin. 61 counties out of the 72 are impacted. Folks, this does have a real impact to our communities, particularly in the eastern part of the district, in Guanago and Waukesha County. They're already seeing an influx of folks coming in that are going to be staffing Foxconn and Foxconn-related jobs, supplemental companies that do other work in partnerships with them. So it's having a real impact all across the 33rd.
Our next question, Representative Horlocker, given the number of educational referenda on the ballots this November, what is your stance on the current general aid system for K-12 schools?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that we need to take a look at. It's one of the reasons why I asked to be on and was appointed to the Blue Ribbon Commission, where we've gone all across the state, talking to not only school officials, educators, school board members, concerned parents, and in some cases, even students, about what they see as issues with the funding formula. From day one, when I stepped into this role in January of 2015, I sat down with every school administrator, all the principals, to talk about the funding formula and what's wrong with it, what needs to be changed, and what we can do to make sure that this is a real win for all of us. By just deconstructing the funding formula, you're not getting to the heart of the issue, and you're picking winners and losers. We can't have that, folks. The economy of the future depends on an educated workforce. We gotta have that. And it's not going to be done by picking the winners and losers that deconstructing the current funding formula and building it back up would be. We do have to work in a bipartisan fashion in order to make any headway on that. I'm committed to it. I've been committed to it. The issue with the referendums is something that I've had disagreements with my own party on, as far as the prohibition on the time limits that you are able to go to referendum. I firmly believe that referendums should be held on general elections, whether it's the spring or the fall. You get the most voter turnout during those, but I don't think that you should be able to just hold a random election for school referendums outside of those times. I don't think you should be prohibited from going to referendum every 2 years or whatever the bill, as we debated last year, 2 years ago now, stated. But I do think that it is the will of the locals, and we are seeing that more and more local communities are deciding that, yeah, it's worth the investment. Thank you.
Mr. White, given the number of educational referenda on the ballot this November, what is your stance on the current general aid system for K through 12 schools?
I agree with Representative Vorlacher. There is a serious problem with how we're funding education in here. And I'm glad that he's at least going and listening to what people have to say about the issue, but there doesn't really seem to be any solutions coming out of it. And quite frankly, I do believe the current funding formula, the way we have it, is one of the huge heart of the problem here. You have a lot of these rural schools where you don't have the same property tax base out there that perhaps a wealthier area has at it. And you just have an educational disparity then. Not of any fault of the kids going to school there. It's just where they live, where they were born. But unfortunately, under the current system, they're not getting the same opportunity because the area isn't as rich as some other areas are. I think if you keep the funding formula as it is, you're going to see that same problem, and even worse, you might see some of these rural school districts that are really trying to tighten their belts here to stay open. They have to shut their doors, and then you have some of these kids that are having to get bused to a district perhaps an hour away in one of these more rural areas of the state. So I think that is first and foremost what we should be looking at for solving this issue we have in public education, is the funding formula and making it fair, so regardless of where you go to school, small town, rich suburb, you have the same opportunities available. Thank you.
Mr. White, Wisconsin relies heavily on gas taxes and registration fees to fund transportation. With revenues from both sources growing slowly, what changes, if any, would you support to meet the state's transportation needs?
Well, I think we do need to be more open-minded with how we're going to be raising revenue there. I know there's a lot of pushback from the current leadership in the state capitol about potentially raising the gas tax to cover that difference there. I really would not like to see us have to go the way of Illinois, where you have a toll booth every 10 miles to cover your transportation budget, but the fact of the matter is, we're not getting the funding that we need to keep these roads in good shape. And as a member of the county board, I can see that. We're really being asked to, especially now, it's budget season for the county board, we're being asked to do quite a lot with not very much help at all. And it's really an issue of making our area more attractive for employers, having good roads. It's tough to show a business why they should come here when almost every highway in the area has potholes, is cracked, being neglected, and getting worse and worse. So I think we need to really be giving our infrastructure a lot more attention than we have been in this past half a decade or so. Thank you.
Representative Horlacher, Wisconsin relies heavily on gas taxes and registration fees to fund transportation. With revenue from both sources growing slowly, what changes, if any, would you support to meet the state's transportation needs?
So I've been pretty open, particularly on my sit-downs with Michael on Morning Magazine, that I am completely against toll roads because it's going to disproportionately hurt us here in southeastern Wisconsin, and the increase of government structures across the state are not within my general operations. That said, I've also said, look, if there's a proposal that's worth taking a look at, I will review it. But to your point of registration fee increases, you can double the registration fee increase for every citizen in the state. And it still is not going to get to the heart of the matter. And that's only impacting folks that live here. That does not take into account the people from Illinois, from Iowa, from Minnesota, who travel our roads every day to get back and forth either to work or to recreate. So from that standpoint, I don't favor putting the burden just on individuals within the state. Again, there's a lot of things that go into particularly transportation proposals during the budget season, and joint finance has their say on the matter, so by the time it trickles down to those of us on the floor for a vote, proposals look a whole lot different than when they start out. So before I would say yes to this or yes to that, I may have to see it. Thank you.
Representative Horlacher, Wisconsin is ranked last among 28 states with renewable energy standards. The legislature changed the state's stance toward climate change and enforcement of pollution laws.
So I think that the renewable energies is something that is starting to become cost effective for individuals, particularly say wind. I know I just toured Gearbox in Iguanago last week and had a good conversation with Bruce Newmiller down there. And they're actually looking to expand over in Europe, right? And one of my good friends from college who now works in the renewable energy sector was on the tour with us and is showing how it's more cost effective than ever before. We do have a proposed solar field going in just outside of town here that, if it's cost effective and it's not being supplemented by the government, absolutely, let's take a look at it. Maybe we can actually save some money for all the taxpayers. But to just wholesale say we've got to throw money into renewables because it's the thing to do, I don't favor that. You have to take a look at what actually makes sense when you go to outlay tax dollars, and I don't think that here and now tax dollars should be going to supplement that. Not to say that I am not a fan of solar panels or wind turbines or anything like that. Again, if it makes sense and is financially stable, that's great. And I think that Gearbox is a perfect example of something that with the right type of regulation reform can grow leaps and bounds. Right now, Wisconsin is one of those states that is more restrictive on where you can place wind turbines. And I think that's something that we're probably going to take a look at. Not to say that we're going to change it, but absolutely something that's part of the conversation.
Mr. White, Wisconsin is ranked last among 28 states with renewable energy standards. Should the legislature change the state's stance towards climate change and the enforcement of pollution laws?
Absolutely. We need to be more open-minded here. In fact, we had a later meeting on the county board last night. And the big topic we're talking about, in addition to the budget, is the possibility of more solar farms being put into the county. We heard some pros and cons, and I think a lot of us on the board are still undecided on whether we think it would be a good option for the county or not. But it's still, it's innovative. It does grow new jobs. Now, of course, that's what we're looking at now. Does the potential for damage to our beautiful countryside here outweighed by the benefits we get from there? And we're still looking at the issue, but at the very least, I think we need to be looking, not into this area, but just across the state, about the economic possibilities that you can get with renewables. And we're always looking for new industries to be bringing in here. Renewables is definitely an area that's growing, and if it's a good fit, we need to not be as tightly restrictive as our current regulations are under the state legislature for renewables.
Thank you, gentlemen. As you mentioned at the beginning of our presentation this evening, we are under some time constraints because we want to give everybody a fair chance, and we also have some time elements that we have to deal with. So at this point, we'd like to give each of you a final opportunity to state why, to the people, why you represent why you want to represent as District 33 and why they should vote for you. We'll start out with Mr. White. Go ahead, sir.
Well, we're pretty much back here where we were 2 years ago when Representative Urlacher and I were in this very position before. The voters clearly made their decision and they re-elected him, but unfortunately, I haven't seen too much that was talked about the previous election being accomplished there. I do appreciate the good work that Representative Urlacher has done, and as a newly commissioned officer in the Wisconsin Army National Guard, Field Artillery Unit, I definitely appreciate all the good work you're doing for combat veterans. It means a lot. But there's so many other areas that our state legislature could be acting upon that affects even more lives than just that, all of us. Education, healthcare. We're not really sure what's going to be happening right now with health insurance. I know my dad, a retired police officer, he worked very hard for over 20 years of his life, and as do most people in the public safety sector. He retired in his 50s, well-earned retirement, but he still got over 10 years to go until he's eligible for Medicare then. I think we have a lot of people that are in that same position for what do they do for health insurance. They don't have to do their job anymore because they're retired, but what else is available there, they just can't afford. That's a huge issue that's affecting so many people across the state. But really, I think the state legislature acknowledges it's an issue. We hear it on campaign commercials, oh, it seems every few minutes, we gotta do something about health care. They say we need to, but I don't hear solutions, and I fear that after 2 more years, we're going to be right back here, nothing has changed, but they'll still be saying, we got to do something about this. I think we need to change and give someone else a chance that should get something done here. Thank you.
Representative Urlacher.
First, I'd like to thank Mr. White for his service to this state and this country. It is an honor to represent folks like him and his family in the State Assembly. It has been an honor of my life, and I know that I speak for both me and my wife when I say that it truly is a privilege to be the representative for the 33rd and to do your work. The bills that come out from not only my committee, but that I author many times come from the roundtable discussions that I have with folks just like everybody in this room here tonight. It's not from some brainchild organization or from Big Pharma or whatever you think it is. It comes from folks like you. All 3 of the bills that I started out with tonight, indicating that were legislative wins for me, came as a result of sit-down conversations with folks just like you. And that is what I will continue to do if elected. Your state representative is continue getting out to the communities, reaching out, and making myself available. My cell phone is plastered thousands of times over all across this district. If anybody needs to get a hold of me, if anybody really wants to talk to me about things, they know how to get a hold of me. I've put it on mail pieces, both at your door, in your paper box, and it's online. So I'd like to thank everybody who has supported me in the past. For those of you that haven't, that's fine. I am still here, willing to listen what you have and willing to see what we can do to work together to make this a better state for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here this evening. We are going to take a quick break, and we'd like to ask the candidates for Assembly District 38 to take the table, please. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. You're listening to the Candidates Forum. Sponsored by the Fort Acton, Jefferson, and Watertown Chambers of Commerce, and sponsored by the American Association of University Women, the Daily Jefferson County Union, and 940 WFAW in Fort Atkinson. We'll have two more debates coming up, having the 38th Assembly District, and that will be followed by the 43rd Assembly District coming up in just a moment. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope you enjoy our presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce our next candidate. We would like to welcome the candidate. I'd like to, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to continue on with our presentation. If you would like to talk to the candidates, please go to the lobby area. All right, let's continue on this evening. We would like to welcome the candidates for the Assembly District number 38. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to continue. If you would like to have a conversation, please take the lobby. We'd like to welcome the candidates Barbara Dietrich and Melissa Winter, both from Oconomowoc, who are facing off for the District 38 seat vacated by State Representative Joe Kleefisch. Let's begin with opening statements, and our first question for Ms. Dietrich. Tell us why you are running, and what would be your top priorities if you were to be elected?
Well, first of all, I want to thank the Fort Atkinson, Jefferson, and Watertown Chambers of Commerce, as well as the Jefferson Daily Union, WFAW, and the American Association of University Women for making this event happen this evening. I would say that I'm running because I am a wife, a mom, a nonprofit leader, and a former small business owner who cares deeply about the community I live in, as well as the state I live in. My top priorities are mental health care, continuing on the fight with this opioid epidemic, and just generally working on resolving the difficulties we're having with the wider health care issue in this country. Having worked in the disability and special needs communities for 16 years plus, I have experience that I think will be of benefit to our district. And I sense that there is not one family in our district, even in our state, that is not affected by the mental health issue that is frankly not being dealt with in the legislature. So I look forward to talking more about that as this evening goes along.
Ms. Winter, tell us why you are running and what would be your top priorities if you were to be elected.
Thank you very much to the three chambers of commerce, to Mr. Barry Douglas, to WFAW, as well as the American Association of University Women. I appreciate your time, everyone else in the audience, for being concerned about the issues and understanding the candidates. My name is Melissa Winker, and I'm running for Assembly District 38 to be a voice for you in Madison. I'm a first-time candidate, a nationally board-certified public school teacher of 17 years, small business owner, a third-generation district resident, and a mom of 4. My husband is a firefighter paramedic. I am running for Wisconsin families to have access to affordable health care, quality education, clean water, and the jobs they need to thrive. Under the Walker administration, we are paying more for less when it comes to health care. Our public schools have been defunded to the point of degradation. Wages for working people have stagnated. Poverty is increasing. Our rivers and lakes are polluted or in peril. Roads and bridges are crumbling. This dire picture goes against everything we value in Wisconsin, where the common good has always been our guide. My opponent sees no problem with the situation and would simply go along with whatever Walker administration wants. Our community values collaboration, balance, responsive government that respects all of the voices in our community. We live in Wisconsin because of our families, our forests and lakes, our historically great Wisconsin schools, and neighbors that truly care for each other. The protections we are fighting for are generational. Education that lasts far beyond what we see. Protected waters, forests, and wildlife that will be here for our grandchildren. Family-sustaining wages that lifts people out of poverty to achieve the American dream. I have talked to people across the district, listened to over 7 open to the public meetings, and strongly believe in a system that respects the voices of our communities once again. We deserve representatives that show up, listen, understand, and will work for us.
Our first question is for Ms. Wicker. More local governments have turned to wheel taxes to fund street repairs and road constructions. Do you support this trend, or do you favor alternative revenue options, and what would those be?
Our road quality right now ranks 44th in the nation. Thanks to the lack of investment in the name of budget frugality. This is a blatant disregard for public safety. And we, the working families of Wisconsin, are bearing the cost as we pay out-of-pocket increased car insurance premiums and repairs and risks to our families. More than 24% of every transportation dollar goes back to paying debt interest. And that has doubled in the last 8 years. We must be fiscally responsible and address this issue, as it will cost us more in the long run. This is one of my top priorities. Hardworking families know that we must address safety and transportation issues with smart, fiscally sound policy, not pass the debt on to our children. Gas tax used to have an automatic index for cost of living before the legislators removed this. After reviewing our current budget priorities, I would take this question back to our communities and listening sessions and review possibilities to make sure that we care for our roads and prioritize them in our budget.
Ms. Dietrich, more local governments have turned to wheel taxes to fund street repairs and road construction. Do you support this trend, or do you favor alternative revenue options, and what would those be?
Actually, I am more in favor of returning to the indexing our gas tax to inflation. But I will say, what concerns me is our counties and our municipalities actually using the tax dollars that were intended to be for roads, actually for roads, rather than rolling them into their general fund. This has been a problem in a few of our communities. And I think that we can start to address that problem more aggressively if we start prioritizing our budgets, just like we all have to in our own homes, and use the money for which it was intended. Now, the governor has said that his intention is to, now that we've got the zoo interchange handled, look more towards the rural roads being worked on. But again, it's prioritizing in the state, just like any of us have to do in our own personal budgets.
Our next question is Dietrich. Given the demand for an educated and prepared workforce, do you feel educational policies in Wisconsin are serving the needs of students and employers? What, if anything, needs to change?
I don't think it's necessarily completely addressing the needs of our employers. I will tell you, at the doors, I hear citizens complaining that workers can't even count back change to them. That to me reflects a failure in our educational system. If our kids can't even do simple math in their heads or count back change, we've got a problem, folks. So we have to really get back to basics with education and make sure our kids have the basic skills they need to thrive in the job market. I would also encourage, and I know we're having this movement now, towards the trades more. Every child is not directed towards a college education job. We need more workers in the trades. So I'm in favor of schools opening up those opportunities more to our students as we kind of really work on the morphing of our worker needs.
Ms. Wickler, same question. Given the demand for educated and prepared workforce, do you feel educational policies in Wisconsin are serving the needs of students and employers? What, if anything, needs to change?
I have taught school for almost 2 decades, from kindergarten to an adjunct lecturer at UW-Madison. I'm a national board educated teacher. And I do see there's a gap between the skills we need and the workforce. This is why our education agenda is so critical. We need to develop the right labor pipeline for jobs needed today and tomorrow. We need to invest critically in our K through 12 higher ed and trade schools at necessary levels. I see firsthand the terrible effects of our budget cuts over the last 8 years. Class sizes in our district, where I teach, have already doubled in some areas. Districts have trouble retaining the best teachers, programs have been eliminated, and test scores are dropping. In recent years in my district, a library position was posted and no one applied. Private voucher schools have skimmed $1,101,489 from our public schools into the 2017-18 general aid reduction in just our Senate District 13. That's your public tax dollars going to run private schools. At this time, these same private voucher schools are not held accountable for the funds they receive. They do not have the same rigorous testing, they do not need to provide IEP services, they are not allowed to keep state funding. They are allowed to keep state funding even if the student has returned to the public school system. This addresses a critical need in funding our public education as a priority. When we do not fully fund our public schools, we cannot adequately address our economy and our job needs. We need to seriously look at this issue as a state and as a community and where our funds are going.
Our next question.
Excuse me,
Yes,
I'd
go
like
ahead, ma'am.
to rebut that. I would say regarding the funding for schools, it concerns me that children on the lower end of the income level are stuck in a school that may not be serving their needs. That is why I'm for the choice program. I think that if our public schools are meeting all their needs, there won't be a desire to go to a choice school. In my job in working with special needs families, I've had many families who have been extremely frustrated with public schools, and their only option was to choose a choice school to break the cycle that they were facing in their public school.
Our next question will start with Ms. Winkler. What is your stance on individuals with pre-existing conditions obtaining health insurance?
Our affordable, accessible health care is our #1 most critical concern when I talk to constituents, potential constituents at their door. It has been proven now with PolitiFact that the statement about our current government protecting pre-existing conditions is not valid. We need to have a concrete plan to make sure that all of our citizens in our community have access to affordable, accessible health care.
to Ms. Dietrich, same question. What is your stance on individuals with pre-existing conditions obtaining health insurance?
This issue is extremely personal for me. I have a son with a chronic genetic illness, and his medication costs $300,000 a year or more. There is no way I will ever let our insurance system get to a point where pre-existing conditions won't be covered. And let me be clear, people on group health insurance already have coverage for pre-existing conditions. That is apart from the ACA. And frankly, I see myself as having some expertise in this area because we are, as I like to say, frequent flyers in the medical care system, whether we want to be or not. We're talking about, with the ACA, about 9.5% of the population, according to the CDC, who would not qualify for group coverage. And out of that, a fraction of those people not having coverage because of a pre-existing condition, in theory. The president has said time and again that he supports covering pre-existing conditions. Our state had a solid model prior to this. I was deeply involved in legislative advocacy on healthcare issues for the last 12 years plus. We had the high-risk insurance pool. I had a 2-time cancer survivor a couple of weekends ago begging me to go back to that. So pre-existing conditions will be covered if I have anything to say about it.
May I rebut for a moment?
Please do.
The Walker administration does not have a clear plan for protecting those with pre-existing conditions. His potential plan of a high-risk insurance pool is shown to be expensive and unreachable for many indeed. Our governor and legislators have not demonstrated any evidence of follow-through with these promises. Before the ACA, in Wisconsin, 850,000 people have pre-existing conditions. And before the ACA, there were these high-risk pools, which is the potential idea in the background for our current legislation. Only 25,000 people applied or were in these programs. The rest of the folks couldn't afford or was unreachable. The high-risk insurance plan does not work. My opponent has claimed that either a COBRA or a charity-based organization works. These are not smart policies in terms of making sure the people in our communities have coverage that they can access and they can afford. We need to move towards a preventable system instead of an emergency system. When I talk to doctors in our community, they say this plan of a preventive system is less expensive and more fiscally sound. We need to approach a plan where we believe in a voucher care for all option when people in our community cannot afford these high risk or high level insurance policies.
May I rebut?
Yes, please.
Badger Care for All is a complete takeover of your health care. I've used these government programs. I've had a husband who's been jobless more than once. I know what I'm talking about. And I will tell you that I have people begging me to go back onto these programs because hers is linked to your income level and gauged on that and your ability to pay. I will also tell you that premiums and deductibles under the ACA are more than double what people were paying on hers. So doing what we're doing now is certainly not the answer. And government takeover, if you want a nightmare, go with that choice.
Our next question will start with Ms. Dietrich. Given the state's advances in lowering its overall tax burden, do you think additional progress needs to be made in this area? And if so, how would you achieve it?
Wisconsin, if you look at us compared to my friends who have migrated south still has a very heavy tax burden. And I happen to be a person who believes there's always government fat we can find. I'll just go back to the whole issue of healthcare. My son has to apply for a program every fall. He's been told for the last, 15 years that they were gonna go electronic with this process. He has to fill out over 24 pieces of paperwork every year just to re-qualify for this program. It's ridiculous the amount we have to pay on manpower, scanning of paper documents, just all these little bureaucratic nightmares we have. So I do think that everything's on the table to look at where our inefficiencies are in our government, in the state. That can help us with our tax burden.
Ms. Winkler, given the state's advances in lowering its overall tax burden, do you think additional progress needs to be made in this area? And if so, how would you achieve it?
Wisconsin shows its priorities by what we invest in. Wisconsin needs jobs with family-supporting wages so that people don't need to work 2 or 3 jobs to stay afloat. Unemployment is at historic lows, but childhood poverty is on the rise. An industry will tell you they can't fill jobs. Our priorities in this state need to be shifted. And it's not about taxes, it's about investing in the things that are important to our Wisconsin families. We do need to address wages, and we do need to address education. Wages, 1 out of 5 workers in Wisconsin are at poverty level wages. This model shows that we have produced lower wages and slower wage growth because of our current right to work legislation, and we repealed the prevailing wage laws. In comparison to Midwest states, Minnesota posted the highest wages, the fastest wage growth, and actually increased its unionization. Researchers noticed that the Gopher state had increased its minimum wage, protected prevailing wage, and allowed new groups of state workers to organize unions and boosted investment into public education and public infrastructure. We have been the worst state in the last 3 years for small business growth. We need to once again invest in our state, in our communities, in our environment. We should make it easy for small businesses to grow by investing in things like technology and education and health coverage, things that actually ease the tax burden for our employers. Wisconsin has lagged behind the nation in the pace of job creation. We are ranked 34th out of 50. Our tax burden has nothing to do with the fact that we need to reprioritize what is important for our communities again. We are more important than our tax burden. We believe in our Wisconsin families. We believe in our community. We believe in our neighbors. And our tax burden shows where do we shift our priorities again.
Ms. Dietrich, given the state's advances in lowering its overall tax burden, do you think additional progress needs to be made in this area? And if so, how would you achieve it?
I believe you just asked.
I believe I just did. I apologize for that. We'll go to the next question. We have one more for you, and we will stay with you, Ms. Dietrich. Would you support a nonpartisan redistricting process, perhaps using population size as the primary determinant as Iowa does?
Great question. I believe there is no such thing as nonpartisan. If you went around this room, everyone in this room has a partisan slant. What I do believe is that perhaps bipartisan work on this needs to take place. If you have a nonpartisan committee appointed, who gets to appoint it? Who is that committee accountable to? I believe in accountability in government. And I also don't kid myself believing in nonpartisan, because frankly it doesn't exist. Let's be realistic, people. If we want to solve this problem, let's have a bipartisan committee to get it done.
And Ms. Wickler, would you support a nonpartisan redistricting process, perhaps using population size, as does Iowa?
I strongly support a nonpartisan, independent organization to redraw our Wisconsin district maps, like the Iowa model. Our communities deserve to be represented fairly at the state level. This is just, open, and fair government. This issue is a top concern in the endorsement process of the Wisconsin State Journal. Like many in our community, they believe also in a nonpartisan, fair, and open government system. They believe in transparency and open meeting laws. I was proud to earn their endorsement. This is a critical issue of our communities. We believe in open, fair government.
On behalf of all of our sponsors, we'd like to thank you very much for participating here this evening. We'd like to give each of you a final opportunity to state why the people you represent in the Assembly District 38 should vote for you. And Ms. Dietrich, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Once again, I want to close this evening by thanking the Fort Atkinson, Jefferson, and Watertown Chambers of Commerce. Those of you who came out tonight, those listening, the Daily Jefferson County Union, WFAW, and the American Association of University Women for facilitating this event. I hope after tonight's exchange, you can see a clear contrast between myself and my opponent. If you want to return to the days of oppressive tax burdens, increasing income taxes, property taxes, gas taxes, if you want more regulatory burdens, supporting by someone who really has no idea how to make a payroll or manage employees, if you want to have someone who has never experienced a $300,000 a year prescription bill, nor has experience in legislative advocacy for those with chronic illnesses, deciding what's going to be done with your health care, if you want students painted into a corner in a school that's just not working for them, then Ms. Winker is your candidate, folks. However, if you want to continue with the progress we've made in lowering taxes, reducing unemployment to under 3% for the 8th straight month in a row, returning our state's manufacturing jobs, a variety of options for educational quality in Wisconsin, respecting life of every age, stage, and ability, lowering health insurance premiums and deductibles while continuing to ensure that our most vulnerable citizens are cared for, and finally, rolling up your sleeves and confronting the mental health care issues in this state, then I am your candidate. I ask for your vote November 6th to represent you in the 38th Assembly District. Thank you.
Ms. Wickler, your closing comments, please.
Ms. Winker.
I apologize.
Melissa Winker, I am running to be your voice in Madison. I will address the serious challenges faced by our families and communities today. Accessing health care and affordability of medications, educating our children, fair wages as opposed to stagnant wages, clean air and water. My opponent has not once mentioned protections for clean air and water. There's a reason that Wisconsin is having trouble attracting and retaining young people. It wasn't always like this, and it doesn't have to be this way. We can pass legislation and a state budget that addresses our priorities. The differences between me and my opponent are clear. I've talked to thousands of people in our district, met with community groups, attended forums, visited local farms, attended neighborhood meetings, held numerous open meet and greets. I'm responsive, will listen, and respect the voices of our district residents and experts. The people in our community want a leader who will use collaboration, fairness, and expertise to create policies that help us all prosper. The people in our community repeatedly emphasize the need for affordable and accessible health care, our schools, and our clean water, and creation of jobs with supporting wages. Our state, over the last 8 years, has prioritized large businesses over our hardworking Wisconsinites. Repeatedly, our state has allowed large donors to write laws that impact our daily lives. This is not the Wisconsin we aspire to be. My opponent has asked to participate in a nonpartisan public education forum, and she refused. My opponent was asked to debate in Economowoc, the largest voted community of her district, and she was not available for any of the dates offered. If she's not available now for us, why would she be available for you after November 6th? I am and will always be an advocate for our great communities, a strong voice to protect and preserve the best of who we are. I sincerely appreciate your investment in understanding the issues, knowing your potential representatives, and I hope to have the honor of earning your vote in 2 weeks on November 6th. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, ladies, for participating in our And I apologize to candidate Winkler. The copy that I was given had your name. Yes, it was not printed correctly on my copy, and I apologize for that. I sincerely apologize for that. At this time, I'd like to invite the candidates for the 43rd Assembly District to vote for me. And again, I would like to ask all of you if you would have a conversation with the previous candidates to move out to the lobby area so we can continue on. We have a time scheduled to meet here tonight, so I thank you very much. This debate is brought to you by the Port Atkinson, Jefferson, and Watertown Chambers of Commerce, and sponsored by the American Association of University Women, the Daily Jefferson County Union, and the and Port Atkinson. Once again, we would like to ask both candidates, if they are here for the 23rd Assembly District, to make their way to the table. Is Mr. Sherlock here this evening? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening, and we would like to get this underway now for the Assembly District number 43. Welcome to the candidates Don Burley, and Gabriel Sirlon, both of Milton, are facing off in the Assembly District 43 seat. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you would please take your conversations out to the lobby so we can continue on with these gentlemen. I apologize, gentlemen. I'm trying to move this on as quickly as we can here, so thank you for your patience. Gentlemen, we're facing off for the Assembly 43 District seat, and Mr. Sirlon will begin with you this evening.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for all who showed up. Thank you to the radio stations and the host for inviting me to this forum this evening. I appreciate it. The reason I am standing up and running is because I did care very deeply about the 43rd, the surrounding communities from Milton itself. Growing up in a small town atmosphere as well as the surrounding communities in small town, I'm a huge advocate for that, as well as the small town atmosphere. In 2015, the fall of 2015, my family had a dark hour when I was in college and working full time. One of my sisters passed away at the age of 30. As you can imagine, during that dark time, yes, we got the usual casseroles from all our friends, but the communities and everybody in the 43rd came together for our family. So I'm standing up to give back to them because they gave so much, not only to myself, but to my family, and that is near and dear to my heart, and I would never, ever give up on the 43rd, since people did that, took care of us during our dark time. My top policy priorities are, number one, I will continue to go throughout the 43rd and work with the voters and all the municipality leaders for what is needed to be done in the 43rd. Number two, I want to really focus on infrastructure and transportation throughout the 43rd. There are some parts of the district, and I'll probably repeat myself throughout the evening, that need roads, and there are other parts that are having the newest and updated. So those are going to be my top two priorities, is showing up and being with the voters themselves, going door to door and working with them. Thank you.
Representative Burbank, tell us why you're running and what would be your top priorities.
Well, the biggest reason I'm running is I think we need to bring stability back to politics. Some of the things I heard in the previous debates, I think we can have differences when we can discuss them to move our state forward without attacking each other. I see Representative Borlacher in the back. Him and I sit together on one committee, and we have great discussions. Sometimes we disagree, but we can have that disagreement without belittling each other for having that disagreement. And I truly respect that, and hope we can bring that day back to our politics. I was a 42-year classroom teacher. I worked with students to respect each other, to work with each other, and to create solutions and to better themselves as people. So I think it's very critical that we start to do that. I'm also running because I want to make a difference in a community. I've spent 39 years in the community of Milton. In that time, I've been involved in some aspect of government my whole life there. As a teacher, as a coach, as a city council member, as a vice president of the school board, as head of our technology committee, as a member of the historical society, as a member of public works committee, and I like to see things get done. And I want to extend what I was able to do in Milton to the rest of my 43rd community. I spend a lot of time in Whitewater, where I'm a member of the Greater Whitewater Committee, which meets every month, which I have not missed a meeting since I've been elected as representative. I'm a member of the Milton Chamber of Commerce, which I'm very active in that committee, which includes businesses from Janesville, Edgerton, and the surrounding area. I sponsor an Albion Tiger baseball team in Edgerton because it's a big part of their culture. And I substitute teach yet in Oregon. In fact, after the election, I've scheduled 3 days in November to get back in touch in the schools because it's something I love to do. I cannot substitute teach in Milton because I'm a school board member, but I want to stay in the classroom and see what's going on in other school districts.
Our first question this evening to Representative Burbank. Since 2005, the state has limited how much counties and municipalities may increase their total property tax collections. Do you support modifications to existing levy limits to give municipalities and counties greater flexibility, or do you support them in their current form?
I believe you have to give some flexibility. When I go to a town meeting or I go to listen to the county people come to town meetings and they talk about, well, we're hoping that we can do this patch of highway this 1 year. They don't know what funds are always going to be available from the state. It's a very difficult time for them to plan, to have a 5-year plan when they don't know what's coming from them. When I sat on city council and had to deal with the budgets, we always talked about what we're going to cut here, what we're going to cut here. We had groups coming to us, asking us for funding. We had, there was never enough money to go around to really fund the things we needed to fund. Some years you might get things, something that might, snowplow, for example, that you might have to repair, but you might have to delay that because you don't have enough money because the revenue limits reduce your capability. I'm okay with limits, but I would like to see some flexibility if there's a justified emergency that might have to be taken care of in case that comes. Same thing with the school board. We have 3,500 students in our district. We have 434 students with special needs. And we have a lot of kids open enrollment coming to Milton with special needs. So sometime, if you cut off open enrollment, then you have to cut your classes. And if you get one more over, you have to then create a whole new class. You might have to hire a whole new teacher. And so lack of flexibility hurts planning for long range. And so some type of government might be okay, but in certain circumstances, I would like to see some flexibility given to local municipalities, school districts, etc., in case emergencies take place.
And Mr. Zerlong, since 2005, the state has limited how much counties and municipalities may increase their total property tax collections. Do you support modifications to exist levy limits to give municipalities and counties greater flexibility, or do you support them in their current form?
First off, we need to start listening to our local municipalities and the voters themselves and what they are wanting done. in their towns, villages, and cities themselves of what they are wanting to prioritize and what is needing to be done. Now, in my hometown, they prioritized the Milton Library. That was raised with private funds. The city backed, voted for a $50,000 seed money that either go towards the library itself or it could go towards the fire department. Now, if I was on city council, I would have voted for first responders and firefighters to have that seed money go towards them, knowing that the library is being privately fundraised to renovate that. So we got to start working with them, but we also need to create shared revenue. I've been going around the 43rd, the smaller municipalities, and they are starting to work together to get the job done, especially when it comes to infrastructure. They're starting to look into, this road has been done X number of years. They also have the problem in the sense of, they have 45 miles of road within their district, and by the time they're going to do a mile a year, by the time they hit number 45, guess what? They're going to start over at mile number 1 again. So we've got to start working together in order to get the job done for the future generations to enjoy our beautiful countryside as well as the municipalities themselves to grow up in.
Our next question, and we'll stay with you, Mr. Zerlon.
Could I have a rebuttal? Or could
Oh,
I
yes, sir, go right ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want to make one correction for Mr. Zerlong in the fact that the city of Milton provided $900,000 for the library. We had two asks, one in 2013 and one in 2015. And so it wasn't just $50,000 a seed, because I sat on the city council and I had to make that vote. And so you check the minutes, you can find 2013 was about 130-some thousand, in 2015 was 720-some thousand. It's a vote I've been criticized for by my opponent, and I would like to say that the Milton Library has been voted the State Library of the Year this year, so I'm really proud of my vote that we helped to renovate that library.
All right, our next question, please. Sure, go ahead, sir.
I'm not criticizing you, Don. I am just simply asking for you not to take credit where credit isn't due. The library, I have looked over the minutes. I have done my research. It was $50,000 of seed money for the library itself, and I am very happy and glad that our library has been voted #1. It is a beautiful library. Anybody in here, anybody listening, should go visit the Milton Library. It's an absolutely gorgeous library. You can learn so much from libraries in your local communities, and I encourage every single library to grow and expand it. So all I'm simply doing is I'm not criticizing you, Don. I'm simply just asking for you not to take credit where credit isn't due.
Our next question, gentlemen, we'll start with Mr. Zerlon. The state spends about $1 billion in state tax dollars on the annual University of Wisconsin system. Do you support or oppose an increase in state funding for the UW system budget, and why?
Within the budget itself, we need to work with the local universities that are within each district on seeing what they're needing. I love that Whitewater has now been joined with UW Rock County to expand into the trades, into the 2-year schools across the board, to not only give the students at Whitewater an opportunity to go there and to get their associate's degree, but give students at UW Rock County to continue in the programs they're working with within that system to go to Whitewater, where it is affordable itself. I'm very grateful that Foxconn made the investment of $100 million to start educating the next generation to take over those technological advancing jobs itself. So we need to continue to encourage growth in our enrollment, but I also want to make sure that our K-12 schools are making sure the students are making the right choice when it comes to either going to a 4-year school, getting their associate's degree, or going into the trades, or even going to the workforce. I agree with a lot of the candidates that not everybody's built for a college degree and above and beyond. But we need to start working and educating them of the benefits of going into these certain areas itself. I had a friend at UW Whitewater. He graduated a year before me in high school. He ended up graduating a year and a half behind me in college. He didn't know what he wanted to do. By the time he would switch degrees, guess what? He didn't have the prereqs, so he had to start over from the classes from basic in the freshman year. And that just accumulates student debt, that accumulates time and energy because you just couldn't make the decision, or you just didn't know what you exactly wanted to do. And I want to make sure when people go into the workforce that they're doing a job they love. When you do a job you love, you're never going to work a day in your life. You're just doing what you love, hands down. And that's why, I've talked to many people in other fields, like doctors and lawyers and everything, and they say, it's not about the paycheck necessarily, it's about the fact that I'm doing what I love and I'm taking care of people in my community.
Representative Irwin, the state spends about $1 billion in state tax dollars annually on the University of Wisconsin system. Do you support or oppose an increase in state funding for the UW system budget, and why?
I definitely support an increase in the state budget because for our UW system, because right now we are spending 1.2 billion on our prison system and 1 billion on our UW system. Does the priorities seem like they might be twisted around? And our state is losing qualified professors to other research universities. UW-Madison has lost top researchers to other universities because we don't pay them as well as other universities did. My brother was a professor in Kansas for a number of years, and he made a lot more money. He never wanted to come back to Wisconsin because they paid him a lot better at Kansas State University than they would have paid him at the University of Wisconsin. And he was a research professor in the business world. And so I believe to keep our millenniums in the state, we need to create high-quality, educated jobs, search out those research dollars, because UW has been a major benefactor of those, and continue to try to get our other universities to get research grants as well. And so I'm a supporter of increasing that budget and taking money away from the prison systems, which I will address how we can do that later on.
Our next question for Representative Bruick. What is your stance on expanding Medicaid in Wisconsin versus the current model?
I'm a believer that we need to expand insurance for all, and that we need to get more people, I'm a believer in everybody having health insurance. And everybody should pay something for their health insurance. And everybody should be covered for the conditions that might exist for them. Now, I look at the money that we have not taken from the federal government, which has been in the millions of dollars that we could use for our healthcare system, and then taking money from our prison system that we could use for our healthcare system, and we could cover more people. And so what I see happening is that we cannot cover the people we need. We cannot we have a shortage of nurses, and when we talk about healthcare, we also have to talk about the rural hospitals that are closing, the rural nursing homes that are closing, and so we need to expand so people can afford to live in them. The cost keeps going up, and we can't supply the needs for rural areas that we need.
Mr. Sherlaw, what is your stance on expanding Medicaid in Wisconsin versus the current model?
We need to have direct primary care. You need to have your health care between you and your doctor. I love going into my doctor's office right now. He knows exactly who I am as an individual, first off. But he also knows me on how I've been healthy. He doesn't have to look at a chart and read it for about the first 5 minutes to get an idea of your medical history itself. So direct care is the way to go about it. We also need to start educating the people that are in our UW system that are going into healthcare as a profession itself, whether you're being an ER doctor, a neurosurgeon, a nurse itself, on the benefits of staying in Wisconsin. Now, I'm a young guy. I'm the youngest guy running for state assembly in the entire state. I understand firsthand what it's like going after a big paycheck right after you get out of college. You better believe with my student loans, I want to get those paid off as fast as possible. But there's other benefits to staying within Wisconsin other than a paycheck itself, and that is knowing your patients, knowing your community, and being there for them, and take care of them itself. Again, I go back to the love that my doctor knows me as an individual versus a chart and a number, and trying to prioritize what needs to be done in the next step for my healthcare itself.
Our next question, given that our region's economic growth has been uneven since the 2008 recession, and Mr. Sherlaw, will start with you. I'll start from the top again. Given that our region's economic growth has been uneven since the 2008 recession, what steps would you take to promote development in the communities that you represent?
That is an excellent question itself. With being in Milton itself, I have watched since 2008, my father being a small business owner, the struggles that we have gone through, not only as a family itself, but watching my other friends and their families go through struggles with being a small business owner themselves, and they're now starting to get their feet underneath them again since 2008. It's been 10 years. It takes some time to rebuild that business and to grow it again itself. So we need to start working with small businesses in the area to encourage that growth itself. Now the market will take effect for wages and everything like that, just like anything else. Amazon announced that it's going to give a pay increase, and that was the market. That wasn't any government stepping in and saying, hey, you need to raise the minimum wage itself. Market will take an effect for that to increase that. But we also, again, going back to education, I'm a strong advocate for education. We need to teach the benefits. Going through our K through 12 system, it doesn't matter if you want to be a doctor or a small business owner. We all start out with that K through 12 education. It's our basic knowledge, it's our foundation. We need to talk to those kids growing up and what they want to do for a job or a career itself, and the benefits of staying within certain communities or certain types of communities in order to grow that business itself, or to go into that career or advancing into that doctorate degree or whatever it may be, and the benefits of staying in the state itself.
Representative Ruick, given that our region's economic growth has been uneven since the 2008 recession, what steps would you take to promote the development in the communities you represent?
You have to look at where the growth in Wisconsin is growing. And if you look at a growth chart in Wisconsin, the growth is along the 2-lane or 4-lane highways. And so through our district, we have the interstate going through. I'm already working with a developer in Newville to develop a convention center in Newville, which would help because we have 9 campgrounds within 5 miles of the area. I brought the DOT down. We need to make some adjustment changes, and we're looking at that. So I'm excited about working that in the next session. We found out that we can not have to follow all federal regulations, and we can get money out of the Joint Finance Committee, which I've got some people already working on that area for us. I just attended a Highway 14 upgrade, which is going to help the Madison, Oregon, and Evansville area, because that's going to be upgraded. It's going to be some safety features put in, which will help attract business, because we look where businesses go. It goes along those corridors where we have 4-lane highways. That's the trend that's been happening lately. And this is why I'm a part of the Greater Whitewater Committee. They're advocating for a 4-lane highway to UW-Whitewater, the only university that doesn't have a 4-lane highway. I'm a big advocate of that. I've been in Speaker Boss's office advocating for that. The Greater Whitewater Committee is advocating for it. We've got some commitment from Speaker Boss. He was going to put this back in the DOT's budget plan next year, because we know that Whitewater, which happens to be the poorest city of its size in Wisconsin, could benefit greatly from a 4-lane highway to Foxconn. Foxconn is a reality. 45 minutes from Whitewater to Foxconn with a 4-lane highway certainly would provide potential workers and a connection from that city to Foxconn, and Foxconn, Whitewater being a business school, would be a good reality. So I'm already taking those steps to try to help my district by looking where the growth is and promoting those areas.
Our next question, Representative Ruick, would you support a ban on semi-automatic weapons in Wisconsin?
I'm not a gun owner. I'll be honest, I never shot a gun in my life, even though I grew up on a farm. And there's a reason for it, is that when I was 5 years old, my uncle had a hunting accident where he shot his cousin, and it caused me great anxiety. So guns and I don't get along. But I am a supporter of sensible gun laws. Growing up on the farm, we had we were hunters, my family were hunters, they had guns. I guess I support, I don't want people to have guns that the police don't have. I don't want the police officers to be outgunned when they're going out on a call. So I'd have to see what the legislation says. I want it to be sensible. I would probably check with gun owners. I have gun owners in my district who are, sensible gun owners. I usually seek advice from them, because they give me good advice, because I've got 2 sides of the stream I'm from. One's an NRA person, one is an NRA person. They both own guns, they both shoot guns. So if I see legislation, I can give you a better answer on what the particulars would be.
Mr. Sherlock, would you support a ban on semi-automatic weapons in Wisconsin?
I do not want to infringe on your constitutional rights itself. Being my time as a legislative assistant, I know firsthand that you got to make sure you read the bills fully and understand them and comprehend them. And again, I want to bring that directly back to the 43rd Assembly and seeing what they want and what they want me to vote on for that specific legislation when it does come across for the floor session.
All right, gentlemen, we're just about ready to conclude this evening's broadcast and participation. We thank all of you for joining us. give you a final opportunity to state why the people in the Assembly District 43 should vote for you. And Mr. Sherlong, you may go first.
Thank you. Again, thank you for all who came out. Thank you for the radio for hosting it. I know that you guys are at the very northeastern part of our district itself, and then you walk a couple blocks and you are in the 33rd Assembly District. Again, I ask for the vote of everybody in the 43rd District this time around. As I said, my experience as legislative assistant, understanding the networks, and able to get that job done for the representatives that I have worked for. In order to do that job effectively, I had to work with everybody, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, no matter which agency in the state you worked for. In order for me to do that job effectively, I had to work with everybody in order to get that done. With my time of living in the 43rd my entire life, my whole 25 years of being on this earth, and seeing the communities come together for my family, that gave me the calling to serve. And I would not give up on you. I will always work with everybody. I will never have an excuse whether I am elected in the majority or the minority. I will never use that as an excuse to not get my job done. I will keep fighting to get those bills pushed through until they either get stopped in committees, the committee did not like them, or the governor signs them into law itself. I will continue to fight for that day in and day out until the job is done itself. So I simply ask for your vote this November 6th.
And Representative Berwick, your final statements, please.
Well, I want to live up to the endorsements I was given by the Janesville Gazette, the Wisconsin State Journal, as champions of education and someone who's been totally involved in education all my life. There needs to be changes made in education. I'm glad Representative Horlacher is working on that because I communicate with him in the Assembly Education Committee. I truly believe there has to be some changes made. I think we need to see minimum state aid given to some of these smaller schools who were only kept going by the extra aid that we gave them to keep them going at the end. I also want to live up to the endorsement given to me today by the Wisconsin Property Taxpayers Incorporated for my work in rural America, as they named me as one of their champions, and I want to continue to be one of their champions. I represent a rural area. I represent 15 townships. I grew up on a dairy farm, and we find it, and I'm serving on the dairy task force, where I've had we'll be attending 6 meetings this month. Next Monday, I'm going to Black River Falls. On Tuesday, I'm going to Tomont. On Wednesday, I'm going to Stevens Point to listen to the concerns of the dairy industry around the state. So I'm going to continue to be the champion that the Wisconsin Taxpayer Alliance gave me today, and for the property tax relief that I introduced in one of my bills in the Assembly, which I worked with the property taxpayers on, and in doing away with some of the personal property tax that is given to some of the small businesses in the rural areas. So I want to continue to be a champion for them as well as for the schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and participating this evening. We appreciate that. And we'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening here in Jefferson. Special thank you to the Port Atkinson, Jefferson, Watertown Chambers of Commerce, the American Association of University Women, the Daily Jefferson County Union, and 940 WFAW. And that concludes our program for this evening. Thank you very much.